kind of wanted to have a little thought experiment with you in terms of thinking ahead 5, 10, maybe 15 years at what the sport of CrossFit is going to look like. And obviously we don't know what it's going to look like, but we can kind of guess based on the last 10 years as I knock that over. Looking ahead to the athlete or the type of athlete who is going to be dominant at that point. If you were to say today, okay, I want to start building the athlete who's going to win the CrossFit Games in 10 or 15 years. Sort of having that as our starting point, where do you begin thinking about, or how do you begin thinking about that as a long-term goal?
Okay, great. I love it. Like fantasy land, like CrossFit fantasy.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can build him. I think that, so if we're talking about, let's call it 15 years down the road, the athletes are reaching their genetic potential for this sport. Very similar. I equate this very similar to NHL hockey. I think it's a very similar type of sport. It's high intensity. It's physical. I think the lifespan and the peaking is very similar.
Less fighting though.
Yeah, except for now, like fighting is not much less. It's like, and people are proposing that fighting comes into CrossFit as it comes out of hockey. So I think that the similarities are very similar in terms of when these athletes peak. So the heyday for a CrossFit athlete is essentially 20 to 25. It's very similar to a CrossFit Games athlete. There are some teenagers that make it, just like in the NHL, there are some teenagers that make it. There's a whole handful of athletes still competing in their late 20s, but the majority of them are not really peaking or competing for top level spots once they're into their 30s. So if we're saying 15 years down the line and we're talking about when they're peaking, that's when they're 25, we're looking at a 10-year-old today. So What do I want a 10-year-old today to be doing?
Yeah.
I want to be doing CrossFit first and foremost, but not exclusively, not as the only thing. There's so much benefit to developing, especially at that young age, the big repertoire. And truthfully, some of that, which we talked about before, that third wave adaptation, that real specific stuff that they're going to get from other sports. I would want them to, if we're talking like 4 seasons, the normal 4 seasons, in the spring, I would probably want them doing some sort of, let's start actually in the fall, like when they're starting school type thing. In the fall, I probably want them to be doing that season. I probably want them to be doing CrossFit. I probably want them to be playing that as their sport. They're in the gym, 3, 4, 5 days a week doing CrossFit. They're probably going to couple that with gymnastics. So that's where I kind of want to smush those two together. In the winter sports, this might surprise some people. I would want that athlete playing basketball.
Really?
There's no real, Katie Henniger was a former basketball. She's a games champion. She's really the only one that's come up through that.
Easy Muhammad, I think, was a...
Easy Muhammad, great call. Yep. I think the reason for that is because the physical stature doesn't line up for our sport. Our sport rewards people in the middle, right? If you think of somebody that's you're either too tall, you can get punished by those bodyweight movements like handstand push-ups, burpees, and things like that. If you're too short, you can get punished by the rope climbs, the wall balls, and the rowing. You need to be... The ideal CrossFitter is 5'9", 200 pounds.
That's male. What about female?
Female is about 5'5", 140.
Okay.
So that's kind of where, 145. That's where we kind of like these guys to be at age 25. We're starting to play with something that we can really mold into something special. Backing up 10 years, and all the dads are listening to this right now, like
taking notes.
Yeah. In the fall, it would look like CrossFit and gymnastics. In the winter, basketball, for the reason not that I want them to be good at shooting hoops, but there's so much coordination development. I think that basketball players are the most coordinated athletes. Hand, eye, foot, true, like when we think about coordination, that type of thing. It's very different than the coordination that a gymnast would pick up. There's something to the hand-eye coordination ball sport, literally ball sport, and also I want them on a team. There's a lot to be said for the development of being on a team. But
it doesn't happen in gymnastics.
Right. Or CrossFit.
Or CrossFit.
Yep. So we want them on a team. I want them to be playing basketball because of that true coordination aspect. It gets them away from being the gym monkey, right? And there's a lot of gymnasts out there and weightlifters out there that do really want our sport. But when you really bring them out and you have them play basketball, you have them play volleyball, you have them throw a baseball, it's like, whoa, how are you at one of the upper echelons of our sport? So I would want them to be doing that. In the spring, I want them doing track and field.
Yep.
Sprinting and middle distance stuff, hurdles, broad jumps, long jumps, high jumps, all that stuff. Develop that real, true fast twitch and speed components.
Now, during track, I mean, is it do CrossFit some number of times a week and also do these other sports to sort of develop those specific?
At age 10, I would be doing the sport. I would be doing the sport. And at age 10, we're talking about 5th, 6th grade. It's not going to be every day. So you certainly have the component to supplement that with CrossFit as well. So 7 days a week, I'd probably be doing 3 or 4 days a week of your sport and 3 or 4 days a week of CrossFit. And then I would also, in the summertime, probably get them swimming, doing triathlons, building up a little bit of endurance base behind that. I think you create that little repertoire, maybe some Olympic lifting in the summer as well. So kind of get that smushed on both ends. They get that really heavy and the really long. Maybe I'm saying a cop-out answer because I'm choosing like 9 sports.
All of them.
Yeah. I think I left 1 or 2 sports out.
There's no archery, but that's probably
right.
valuable.
Yeah. But that's really where I think I would go with that, is that team sport, real coordination aspect, and then some of those specialty things that have real, true transfer over into what we're trying to create.
And then, so that's roughly around 10. Is that, when does that just through high school?
Yeah. I think that would build up until, truthfully, that's not really, that would be a lot.
Yeah.
But at age 10, you want that vast array. You want that experience and all. We're not looking for somebody to excel in anything. I don't want if the goal is to win the CrossFit Games, I don't want them to be spending, 2.5 hours a night shooting free throws. I want them on a team playing basketball and going through the practices so they can build up the coordination and really just that kind of like overarching adaptation that we're looking for. Similar to track and field, I don't need them to nail down their starting positions out of a block. I just need them faster. So they don't need to be doing this exhaustively or completely or for a very long time. I think this kind of lives through their elementary years, their middle school years. When they get to high school, they're probably going to find a sport that's a little bit more higher level, if they're in a competitive sport. I wouldn't want my athletes playing AAU or really truly specializing, but picking 2 sports particularly, probably maybe even just 1 in high school, and then supplementing the rest of the year with CrossFit, sprinting, and Olympic lifting.